Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of heavy boots outside your door. You haven't stolen anything, you haven't killed anyone. But by morning, you will be chained in a dark, damp cellar, waiting to be burned alive. Your crime? You owned a black cat, or you knew how to use mint leaves to cure a fever. This wasn't a nightmare. This was the terrifying reality of Europe for nearly 300 years. Before the madness started, life in rural Europe was simple. Isolated villages across Germany, France, and England relied on tight-knit communities. People trusted their neighbors. They had to, because the winters were harsh and survival depended on it. But beneath this quiet existence, a dangerous shift in power was brewing in the shadows. In the late 14th century, the world suddenly grew colder, literally. Historians call it the Little Ice Age. Crops froze in the fields. Cattle died of unknown diseases in their barns. Entire villages faced starvation, and human psychology dictates one cruel rule. When survival is threatened, society demands a scapegoat. The people demanded answers from their leaders and their church. Why was God punishing them? But the authorities couldn't control the weather. They couldn't stop the plagues. So, instead of admitting powerlessness, they created an invisible enemy. An enemy that only they could protect the people from. In 1486, a German clergyman named Heinrich Kramer published a book that would change the course of human history. It was called the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. This wasn't just a book, it was a weaponized instruction manual. It told the public that magic was real, and that their own neighbors were secretly working for the devil. But who were these supposed witches? They weren't casting spells or flying on brooms. They were usually the most vulnerable people in society. Widows who owned valuable land, midwives who understood natural medicine, or simply women who refused to stay silent. To accuse them wasn't just about faith, it was about eliminating competition. Once the Malleus Maleficarum spread across Europe, a mass hysteria took hold. You were no longer innocent until proven guilty. The justice system was completely flipped upside down. If an angry neighbor pointed a finger at you, the burden of proof was on you. And proving that you weren't a witch was mathematically impossible. The church and the local magistrates now had absolute power. They established special courts, completely bypassing regular laws. They convinced the peasants that doubting the existence of witches was in itself a crime of heresy. Fear was no longer just an emotion, it was an institution. The social fabric of Europe tore apart. Children were interrogated and forced to testify against their own mothers. Husbands abandoned their wives to save their own lives. In towns like Trier and Würzburg, the paranoia grew so deep that people would accuse their friends first, just so they wouldn't be the ones accused. The trials were nothing more than a theatrical display of terror. Once you were dragged into the dungeons, there was no presumption of innocence. The inquisitors didn't want the truth, they wanted names. And under the threat of the rack, people would confess to anything. They confessed to flying through the night sky. They confessed to meeting the devil in the deep woods. They confessed because the pain of the interrogation was far worse than the promise of the fire. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy, perfectly engineered by those in power. Public executions weren't just punishments, they were public relations. The town squares became stages for a gruesome show. When the fires were lit, the authorities sent a clear message to the watching crowd. We are your only protectors. Without us, the darkness will consume you. But if you follow the money, a much darker truth emerges. When a witch was executed, a property didn't go to her grieving family. It was confiscated, divided between the church, the local magistrates, and the executioners. Witch hunting had become a highly profitable industry. Think about who was truly lost in these fires. The healers, the midwives, the women who understood the natural world long before modern medicine. By burning them, the authorities didn't just kill individuals. They successfully erased generations of ancestral knowledge. Year after year, decade after decade. From the oldest cities of Europe all the way to Salem in the New World. The smoke kept rising and the populations fell into line. Fear is the ultimate leash, and society was firmly collared. Some towns lost nearly all of their female population. Men were left to wander through ghost towns, afraid to even mourn their wives, because showing sympathy for a condemned witch made you a target too. It was a masterclass in psychological control. But no fire burns forever. By the late 17th century, the political landscape was shifting. The scientific revolution was beginning to dawn, and men of science and reason started to quietly question the courts. If this dark magic was real, why did it only seem to affect the poor peasant? Why couldn't a powerful witch strike down a corrupt king or a wealthy bishop? The logic of the Malleus Maleficarum began to crumble under the weight of basic human reason. The trials didn't end overnight. They ground to a halt very slowly. Judges finally began demanding actual physical evidence. And suddenly, when the courts required proof instead of just rumors, the witches simply disappeared. The dungeons were empty. The executioners lost their jobs, but the damage was already permanently woven into the fabric of human history. Over 60,000 lives completely erased, not by magic and not by demons. They were killed by the most dangerous force on earth, an organized, terrified mob led by politicians disguised as holy men. It was never about religion. It was always about control. Centuries have passed since the last pyre went cold. We look back at them now as primitive, uneducated. We sit in our modern cities, lit by electricity instead of torches. We tell ourselves we are too smart to let that happen again. But human nature hasn't changed at all. Only the tools of control have evolved. We no longer use wooden stakes or iron maidens. Instead, we use screens, algorithms, and the endless 24-hour news cycle. Look around you today. When society faces a crisis, a ruined economy, a pandemic, a sudden political shift, what is the very first thing the authorities do? They point a finger. They give you a scapegoat. They tell you that your own neighbor is the enemy, that someone with a different opinion is a fundamental danger to the community. The mechanics of the witch hunt are still running perfectly. Only the labels have changed. Today, you don't need a physical courtroom to ruin a life. A single accusation, spread fast enough, can destroy a reputation in hours. And just like the 16th century, proving your innocence is almost impossible once the mob has made its decision. So ask yourself, if the world suddenly grew cold again, if the food stopped arriving at the supermarket, how long would it take for the modern man to start hunting his neighbors? The true lesson of the witch trials isn't that magic is fake. The terrifying lesson is that mass hysteria is incredibly easy to manufacture, and those in power know exactly which buttons to push. The next time everyone around you is suddenly terrified of the exact same thing, the next time you are told to hate someone you've never even met, stop and remember the smoke rising over Europe. Because the witches may have been a myth, but the monsters who burned them are very, very real, and they are still here.
Subscribe to uncover the darkest chapters of history